everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Have you ever felt the chilling feeling of an unwanted presence in your life? Maybe one of those elusive spirits, the ones that seem to linger just beyond our sight, waiting to reveal themselves at unexpected moments. Similar, yet different, to another kind of unwanted presence. The human kind, specifically the ones who act like ghosts themselves, seemingly invisible, before deciding or being forced to reveal their true intentions. Both entities share a haunting presence and seem to exist in a realm that lies beyond the perception of society. Like ghostly specters, secret stalkers try to become invisible. And just like a ghost that haunts our space, a stalker operates unseen, weaving in and out of the fabric of one's everyday life. Their intentions shrouded in mystery, and their actions leaving a trail of unease in their wake. Unwanted attention doesn't feel good, regardless of the source. Lucky for the individuals in tonight's stories, they manage to navigate through the murky depths of these sometimes paranormal, sometimes not encounters. And though different, they all seem to leave lingering questions and haunting memories behind. So, let's get started, shall we? I had a stalker, a man who thought he was in love with me. He would dream of me, which were signs that we were meant to be together. He lived in another city. I'd known him years ago, but had forgotten that he existed. He began sending letters to me that were pages long. He called my place of work to ask about me. He kept calling until our administrative assistant told him in no uncertain terms that this was harassment. He responded with a slew of epithets that I won't repeat here, but these comments likened her to female genitalia, along with racial slurs. My director told me to report him as a stalker, and I did. He stopped calling, but he didn't stop writing. I got more letters. He found my work email and my personal email. He found my home phone number. He asked questions about my husband. He asked for money. He wrote disgusting things. I contacted the police in his city, begging for help. They told me that he hadn't broken any laws, so they couldn't do anything. He had a police record for assault. I had to seek out information, searching for details about my stalker, finding out everything I could because the police in 2 different states couldn't help me. This meant that he stayed in my head. I found out he had a Facebook page. People had left remarks saying that he was stalking a 13-year-old girl for sex. They called him a child molester. I left all social media save Quora and Twitter. I kept all the media that was related to my job because I had to do so. He also found me on Twitter. I blocked him and anyone who had a similar name. I deleted my website, which I used to conduct a side business, and I deleted my email address that he found on my website. I blocked any numbers I didn't recognize from my phone, and I never answered any unknown calls. I couldn't stop him from emailing me at work, but all emails went into spam, and then I saved them in a folder. Keep in mind, I never once spoke to him or acknowledged that he had reached me. Not once, but he knew. He began to get angry that he was losing access to me. He would write emails saying, "What is wrong? Do you hate me?" I would talk to my husband, asking what I could do. I thought about my son. Was this guy going to appear one day at my doorstep? Did he know where my son went to school? My mind was plagued with constant worry, and I always felt sick to my stomach when I thought of him. I had thrown out the first letter he sent me, but I was advised to keep everything else so that I could make a case if something happened. So I was a sitting duck for a possible event that could result in my own harm or someone that is dear to me. I haven't heard from him since 2016. I would like to think that ignoring him plus cutting all of my possible access helped me. I do know he got arrested for something and was put in jail. I don't know if he's out. I read somewhere, someone fantasizing about a stalker. You want this? Do you really think this is about love, desire, romance? It's sick, sick, sick. You worry all the time. You don't know when you walk down a stairwell if someone will grab you by the throat and drag you into a room. You keep remembering all the things he said to you. In one way, he did me a great favor by calling my job because my boss said, "Let me know what I can do. I will testify, sign any legal document, or do whatever I can to keep you safe." Other people called me into their office to offer their support. I wasn't alone. I understand that the media often makes stalker-like behavior into something romantic. It fills the pages of fan fiction. A lot of fairy tales have stalker-like males and females in which they reveal they are the one who will save them, who will make them happy. So the imagination may think this is okay. It's not. I know I've had a good day when my stalker does not cross my thoughts. He imprisoned my mind as much as my movements. Even writing this, I want to express feelings that are better unsaid. I'm glad that enough people took me seriously. Stalkers are terror personified, a personal hell. I'm going to preface this story before getting into it. I'm a Division I football player here in Alabama. I play offensive line. For those that don't know what that is, I'm basically saying I'm a big dude. Currently 6'5", about 300 pounds. This to say that I've not really been scared of animals or people where I live, because I'm genuinely just bigger than them. Now, it was late at night, and my high school basketball team at the time had just made the playoffs. I was currently on the phone with my girlfriend at the time, and it was around 12:30, 1 a.m. As I was pulling into my neighborhood, I saw this woman with long black hair, wearing a Civil War period dress. It wasn't very weird to me to see random kids around my neighborhood, because I live near a foster home. What freaked me out at first was that it was January, February, and it was late at night. It was freezing. To pull into my neighborhood, I had to drive past her. I slowly went about 3 miles an hour past the woman, and I really didn't know what to do. As I passed, she was still staring at the ground. As I checked my rearview mirror, her head snapped up, and I saw an extremely evil-looking face. I hung up the phone and was going 65 to my house. As I mentioned, I'm a big dude. So when I arrived at the house, I sprint up my porch stairs and into my room. Me being my size woke everyone up in the house. My dad enters my room to check on me, and I tell him everything that's happened. He asked if I was on anything, and I told him of course I wasn't. He told me to get some sleep, and I of course couldn't sleep. It popped into my mind. I had a neighbor that I was very close with who had long jet black hair. Instantly, I snapped her on Snapchat saying, "That was a good prank. You got me." She said she wasn't even in the state. She didn't know what I was talking about. She sent me her location on the Snap map, showing that she was in Baltimore. That was it. There was no chance I was getting any sleep that night. I hopped on Xbox to tell my friends about the events that had just occurred. Of course, they didn't believe me, saying that I was joking, and I told them how serious I was. At the end of the Xbox session, it was around 4 a.m. I had gotten off and was going to try to get some sleep. I went to my bedroom, and as I was walking past the blinds, there she was, standing there, under the one streetlight in my neighborhood. I slammed the curtains shut and peeked again. She was gone. I have no idea what happened or what was going on that night. My dad and little brother, They've claimed to see the same woman years later. They have some stories of their own that I'll ask if I can share. This is my first post, so if you have questions or if you have any idea what's going on, please let me know. Update. Since my encounter, I've now moved to college to play football, but as I mentioned earlier, my brother and my dad have had encounters as well, and they've agreed to let me share them. I've also done some research, but I'll get into that as well. About a year ago, my brother was packing up around 10 p.m. to go to a baseball tournament in Atlanta the next day. As he was loading up the car, he heard a noise that sounded like a woman, far away in the woods. He said he thought that it was our neighbor or something. My brother finished putting the last bag in the back of the car when he looked in our driveway and saw the woman fitting the description of my encounter standing there. My brother isn't small either, and had made fun of me for the way I acted when I had my encounter. Anyway, as he saw the woman standing there, she did the same thing. You couldn't see her face because of her long jet black hair. He said, "Hello, and are you okay?" And she said and did nothing. She snapped her head up, and he saw a horrible-looking face. He sprinted up through the porch and locked the doors. He peeked out the window, and she was staring back. When he peeked back again, she was gone. My dad's experience, it's not very long, but it's an encounter. My dad works around the country because of his job, and he finds himself coming home late sometimes. As he was driving home late one night, he saw the woman I described, but this time, next to the cemetery where we lived. I have no idea if that's a connection to her or not, but we've never stepped foot in that place. Anyways, he saw this woman with the same description as both of our encounters and passed her. He checked his mirror and she was still there. He turned around his car to get a better look, and she was gone. So, my research. I'm not into horror films or really anything scary for that matter, but I have done some research since my encounter. But this is definitely a new field for me, so any advice would be great. There's a website that talks about the ghosts in our area of Alabama, and it turns out I live near an old iron mill. And to sum up the short story, this woman and her child, they were killed by a fallen chimney about 1 minute from where I live, and she seems to be sighted from time to time. She's labeled as a stalker spirit, one that's mostly friendly or doesn't hurt anyone, but I have no idea, to be honest. I appreciate any feedback. Thanks for listening. This may not seem like a big deal to some of you, but as a parent, this was pretty horrifying to me. It was around 1 a.m. when I woke up to a loud bang that shook my walls. My husband was still asleep, but my 8-year-old daughter rushed into our bedroom just as I was getting to my feet. She was crying because her shelves had fallen over, and that was enough to scare me. They were heavy and mounted to the wall above her bed. I couldn't imagine how they would have fallen. That was my greatest fear when she wanted them over her bed, so they were extra secure. Not that I would tell her this, but they were installed with the assumption that she might try to climb on them. I followed her to the hallway to see an intensely bright light spilling out from her room, and started feeling like I was in the Twilight Zone. It reminded me of when people talk about UFOs and see a blinding light outside. I really didn't know what to think. We live in a tiny neighborhood in a tiny town. I mean, nothing happens here. When I got into her room, it was practically daylight thanks to the light spilling through her window. The shelves and the items that they held were scattered all over her bed and floor. I couldn't even get to her window, so I ran to the front door, and I saw a big truck crashed right into the side of my house, right on the other side of where my daughter's bed lay. The speed limit in our neighborhood is 25, and we live right at the bottom of a hill on a curve. To say I was furious is an understatement. The only thought I could process was how close I'd just come to having my entire world being blown apart. While dialing 911, I rushed over to the driver and instantly recognized him through the open window. Like I said, tiny town. Travis had been a year ahead of me in school, and he's known for drunk driving, but his mother is the police chief. So yeah, nothing ever happens to him. He was snoring while I explained the situation to the dispatcher, and I had to shake him awake. Travis jerked to attention, jumped out of the truck, and hovered over me, screaming that I wrecked his truck into his friend's house. When I tried to correct him, he shoved past me so hard I fell to the ground. That's when my husband finally came out, and Travis immediately ran up to him, asking if he saw that crazy bitch wreck his truck. He was belligerent, had no clue where he was or what he had done. When police arrived, they tried to put him in handcuffs, and he literally punched one of them while screaming that this was his friend's house and to go arrest the bitch that wrecked his truck. He was pointing at me, calling me every name in the book, while threatening my life. It took 3 of them to get him in handcuffs, and that only lasted until his mom arrived. She asked to speak with my husband in private. In the end, Travis got off scot-free again, and we got our wall fixed. I was livid. I'm still livid. No one did anything. My daughter could have died. He could have died. No one cared. I had to watch while 3 officers uncuffed that drunk piece of shit and helped him into the back of his mom's car. Just before they closed his door, I heard one of them say the bitch was getting arrested and not to worry about it. They sat there and fed his delusions right in front of me, like he'd just hopped a curb instead of driving a truck through my kid's room. The scariest part about all of this is that he wrecked another truck the following week. He was drunk again, but luckily, no other people were involved. It's only a matter of time before he kills someone. It's absolutely terrifying that this kind of crap still flies under the radar in 2024. The police down here don't care about body cams or witnesses because they've been getting away with this garbage for generations, and not one of them has ever suffered a consequence. I'm ashamed of my hometown. It disgusts me. My mom was a single parent through my teenage years. I have 2 younger sisters as well. My mother worked 3 jobs at one time, and she was always gone. Her first job started at 4:30 in the morning. She left the house before any of us were awake for school and wouldn't be home until midnight. Yeah, she didn't sleep for years. One morning, I saw a dark figure walk past my bedroom door and down the hall. I called out, "Mom?" The figure leaned back and poked its head into the doorway, as if it were taking one more glance to answer my call, and then continued back down the hallway, out into the living room kitchen area. I got out of bed, not having heard the very loud front door close. I imagined my mother would be in the living room, gathering her items before leaving. I walked into our living area and found no one. Nothing. I immediately phoned my mother. She was already at work. I told her what had happened and explained I was freaking out. This was before cell phones, so my mother had asked me to take the cordless phone and check the entire house. Are the doors locked, front and back? Yes. Check my room. Is it empty? Yes. The bathroom? Yes. Oh my God, Mom. I know I saw someone. Didn't I? My mom calmed me down, tried to explain that maybe it was sleepy stuff in my eyes, throwing me off. Over the weekend, when we had time to spend together, Mom finally broke down, telling me that maybe it was a ghost, but it would be a friendly ghost. Mom went on to explain that the people who sold her the house, they did tell her that an elderly man had peacefully passed away in his sleep before we purchased it. My sister, who's only 3 years younger than me, decided to name the ghost. It was a kind old man, so his name would be Henry. Naming the ghost made it seem less scary for some odd reason. After the first sighting and a name, Henry maybe felt a little more comfortable coming out because we started to see him and his antics more frequently throughout our home. Henry would shut the bathroom door if one of us girls left it open while using the bathroom. This happened very frequently. We were a house full of girls, so we never bothered to shut the door to our one bathroom that we all shared, and locks were not an option, especially in the mornings when we were all getting ready for school. One day, both my younger sisters were visiting my friends or doing their own thing, so I had the house to myself. I decided to watch a movie. We kept our movies on the bottom shelf of a china hutch that my grandmother made for my mom. The door was heavy and preferred to be open as opposed to shut. What I mean to say is if you unlock the door, it would naturally swing wide open. When opened, the one door, movie side, would hang in such a way as to block access to the hallway from the living room. I didn't need to go down the hall, so I left the door open. While watching the movie, out of the corner of my eye, the door slowly swung shut on the china hutch. And while it didn't lock, it was impossible that it would close on its own without some help. Chills ran up and down my spine, arms, legs, neck, everywhere. I immediately phoned my mother at work again and said, "Hey, sorry to call you at work, but Henry just closed the door on the china hutch and suddenly I didn't feel like being alone anymore." Mom told me that she understood and was impressed with Henry's strength to close that door. I agreed. We chatted until I told her I felt better, safe again, and I went back to watching the movie with the china hutch door locked, closed, to keep Henry happy. We moved out of that house when I turned 17, and as we were closing the front door for the last time on the move-out day, we all stuck our heads back inside and said, "Goodbye, Henry." Even though Henry was a friendly ghost, it was still scary as a young teen to come face to face, so to speak, with a ghost, regardless how nice he was. It was almost midnight in the master bedroom of our beautiful home in Maui, Hawaii. My wife and I were settling into bed, and there was a soft light in the room. All of a sudden, we hear the very distinct sound of a child's footsteps running down the hall towards our bedroom. It caught both of our attention immediately. The sound came to an end right on the other side of our closed bedroom door. We both looked at the closed door in silence, only to see the door handle, which was a lever style and not a normal round doorknob, slowly turned down as the door began to open. It was clear as could be. We both watched in suspense, which quickly turned to fear as the door pushed in and all the way open to reveal no one. Now the fear turned to horror as the child's loud footsteps began walking again, and this time they were clearly coming toward the bed. There was a slight pause, and then something happened that my logical, non-superstitious mind will never be able to really explain. There was suddenly the weight of a young child climbing on our bed, and although completely invisible, this energy moved to the middle between the two of us and settled in. The indentation on the blankets and mattress were as clear as could be, and yet there was no one there. We turned to each other in absolute horror, as we both knew we were seeing the same thing. How could this be? Who was this, and why were they in our bed? After a few minutes, this entity, which we both agreed felt like a small male child, disappeared as fast as he appeared. We laid there for a long, sleepless night, and the next day, through many calls and inquiries, we found out why this and many other things, some even more terrifying, had been happening to us. We learned that the man that built our house did so as a dream home to his wife and young family. He had a 3-year-old son who, shortly after the house was completed, died in the home. He tragically drowned in the bathroom, off the hallway right outside of our bedroom. A bathroom, by the way, where the bathtub had mysteriously filled and then overflowed with water and flooded the house on numerous occasions, even when no one was home. But that's another story, if you're interested. We realized that his son was still present in our house and had been for the 2 years that we lived there. The day we learned this full story, we left all of our belongings except a suitcase of clothes and left Hawaii, moving to Oregon, on the U.S. mainland. We sold the house furnished as is and never stepped foot in it again. That was the scariest thing I've ever seen in our bedroom. Luckily, never had to see it again. I've always been a bit of a cynic when it comes to relationships, but I've just hit a new low. My primary job is writing, but I also wait tables part-time for a little lunch place downtown and volunteer at the food bank. It's only a few days a week, but recently, a man called Gabe came in and asked to be seated in my section. The hostess assumed he was a friend, and he did look vaguely familiar, but I didn't know him. When I asked if we'd met before, he said that I did a good job waiting on him a few months ago. It seemed like a reasonable enough story, so I took his drink order and didn't think any more about it. He looked to be around my age, and he wasn't unattractive, but even if I had been looking for a relationship, he wasn't my type. When I brought him his sweet tea and took his order, he asked a few questions about the menu and slid in a bit of small talk. That was all fine. Some people are just friendly, and he wasn't setting off any creep alarms. Then he needed 2 refills before he'd gotten his burger, so I left a small pitcher on the table and went back to work. All of my tables were full. I didn't have time to chat even if I wanted to. When I brought out his food, he was staring at me with a goofy look on his face. I laughed it off, asking if there was something in my teeth, and he said that I was just really beautiful. That's when I realized he had actually been flirting the whole time, and I worried my friendliness may have been misconstrued. Well, it clearly had been. Don't get confused, though. I'm really not all that special to look at. In my 2 years of waiting tables, I've been hit on maybe 2 times before that. It just isn't a very common occurrence, and the previous incidents were awkward but completely harmless, so I expected Gabe to be the same way. When I gave him the bill, he asked me to dinner that weekend, and I politely declined. That should have been the end of it, but he came back a couple of days later and repeated the whole process. Then we did it for a 3rd time a couple of days later. Once again, I said no, and he left without making a fuss, but my patience was wearing thin. That night I drove home, and I was off for the next few days. My only plans were to write and watch Netflix, yet at 9 a.m., I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I didn't answer, they started texting. The first one said, "Hey, it's Gabe. Call me back real quick." I still didn't know how he got my number, but since I didn't give it to him, I saw no reason to respond. And then, 5 minutes later, he said, "I'm running a little late, but I'm on my way. Call me when you get this." I assumed he was referring to the restaurant, like he'd decided to come sit in my section and call it a date or whatever, whether I liked it or not. That really rubbed me the wrong way, but since I wasn't at work, I decided to let it go for the time being. Then, a few minutes later, he sent, "Hey, can you call me real quick? I'm on Highland, but I can't remember if your house is the one with brown or maroon shutters." That terrified me. Not only did he know what street I was on, he had my house narrowed down to 2 possibilities. I ran to the window and peeked outside to see a blue truck creeping past. It went to the end of the street. It turned back to park on the curb between my house and the one with the brown shutters. The next message read, "I'm here. Can you come out front? I don't want to go to the wrong house." I'm not sure if he followed me home or what, but I felt there was no choice but to respond. I couldn't tell if he was genuinely delusional or if he thought this would actually manipulate me into going out with him, but it didn't matter. A strange guy was sitting outside my house, and I take that sort of thing pretty serious. Leaving no room for misinterpretation, I replied, "I don't know how you got my information, but you're not allowed on my property. If you don't leave immediately, I'm going to call the police." When he actually started driving away, it was like a huge weight lifted off my chest. I called a friend to vent, but after a while of nothing else happening, I went back to writing and mostly let it go. That evening, just as it was getting dark, there was a knock on the door, and my blood froze. But then I looked outside to see a flower shop van and a uniformed man holding a large bouquet of roses. Gabe was the only person who could have sent them, and it was annoying that he wouldn't take a hint, but I didn't want to leave the flower guy hanging, so I opened the door. You guys probably already know that it was actually Gabe, but I almost puked when I saw his face. I dropped the flowers and tried to run back inside, but he got his foot in the door and came in behind me. Even as he cornered me in the kitchen, he was still talking like we were going on a date. He wasn't angry or aggressive in the traditional sense. It almost felt like an awful practical joke. I was cowering against the counter like a frightened child, and he stood over me, smiling like a lovesick puppy. He said that he had reservations for us, 8 o'clock for dinner. He grabbed my arm and started dragging me toward the door. I tried to pull away, and his grip tightened so hard that I screamed. When we got out of the house, my eyes frantically searched for anyone who might be outside. But I was out of luck. Where was everyone? I began screaming for help and tried to break free, but Gabe put one hand over my mouth, wrapped the other around my wrist, and forcefully put me into the flower van. Once he got me inside and back on the road, he began talking like we were on a normal date again, so I played along while discreetly texting 911 between my legs and the door. I started by sharing my location and saying that I was kidnapped from my address in a blue truck with a man named Gabe. The operator said help was en route, and I continued sending location updates with each new turn. Finally, we passed a police cruiser that quickly turned on its lights and got behind us, but Gabe refused to pull over. Instead, he punched the gas, and we ended up in a full-blown police chase. I'm not sure how long it lasted. More and more cruisers joined in, and we eventually ended up driving into oncoming traffic. I screamed through most of it and forgot all about talking to 911. Eventually, we crashed into a guardrail, and Gabe tried to run away, but he was tackled to the ground. I let paramedics do a quick exam, and then an officer was kind enough to give me a ride home. I know things could have been much worse, but the whole ordeal was the most terrifying experience of my life. Not only was I forcefully removed from my home, I was almost killed in a high-speed collision on multiple occasions during the chase. Gabe was arrested and out on bond by the next day. I have a restraining order, but it doesn't feel like enough. The truth is that if he decides to come after me, a piece of paper won't be enough to stop him. I've put up extra cameras and bought new locks for the doors and windows, but it just still doesn't feel like enough. Anyway, thanks for reading. It at least helps to know I'm not the only person going through this. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world over here. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night. Keep those eyes open long enough for those deep sleep videos, and of course, double features. Subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons whom we appreciate so very much. Tracy S, Tamara K, Monica L, ZoeWatt, Chelle B, Donald C, The Dark Cosmos, Marion T, Rat Girl, Alisha S, Erin G, Nikki H, Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendon G, Paul T, Nicholas C, Lissane, Arlene F, and Adrienne. If you want to support the Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour, or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.